So, what is the most hated episode of Rick and Morty? Let's talk about it. Now, Rick and Morty is one of my all time favorite shows, as this is one of three Rick and Morty shirts that I own, along with other memorabilia. But that isn't to say that I don't have some episodes that I don't personally love. One, Rick Potion number 9, not the biggest fan. It's when Rick goes around and he makes all different potions, and then ultimately they Cronenberg the whole land, and it's like, okay, new planet time. Thought it was okay. I got sick of it after a while. Look who's purging now. I never loved it. They go to Purge Planet, they purge. That's the episode. I just really didn't care for it. It was a lot of violence. I know a lot of people really like Rick and Morty because they like war and they violence. That's not why I like it. I think it's silly and fun, and I like the creativity behind it. And another one that I really didn't like was Rick something Morty Date. It was the last episode of the third season, which for a very long time, there were only 3 seasons of Rick and Morty. So I just got sick of it after watching it over and over and over again and going, okay, yeah, like, can I have new Rick and Morty? But obviously, those episodes are liked by a lot of fans, and everyone's gonna have their own favorites, and everyone's gonna have their personal opinions. But there is one episode that, for some reason, almost every single fan hates. This episode is Rick Dependence Spray. So I kind of really liked this episode. I was a pretty big fan of it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was creative. I love the chuds. But before I go too into it, I feel like I might need to do a little bit of explaining, just for the people who aren't super aware of what this whole episode is about, and maybe you might be able to pick up on a little bit of why it's so disliked. We start off with an opening scene of Rick and Morty seeing this machine that his mom uses at the horse's doctor's office to extract horse semen. That obviously Morty's like, no, I want to use that. That sounds like fun to me. So then it cuts to, and he's like, wow, I've been hanging so great using this horse semen extracting machine on myself, you know. And then Rick comes in with a vat of horse semen. I'm going to be saying semen a lot through this. You know what? I'm going to be saying a lot of nasty things through this entire video, but you're going to have to sit along with me and listen to me explain. See, that might be part of why people don't like it. Rick and Morty doesn't always get, like, this absolutely, like, juvenilely graphic, but in this particular episode, it was just like, oh, look at how funny this is. It's sperm, lol. You know, so I could see why a lot of people wouldn't like that, but personally, I don't mind it. I don't mind a little poop humor, you know. I don't mind a couple little peanut jokes, you know, here and there. I think they're funny. I appreciate it. So basically, Rick says, okay, look, Morty, I have this big vat of horse sperm. And Morty goes, oh, okay, what are you gonna use it for? Aren't you gonna check to make sure it's horse sperm? And Rick is like, I'm pretty sure it's labeled as it is, whatever. And then, of course, he uses it in whatever reaction he does, and then it explodes. And because it had been mixed with Morty's, right? So we get a big explosion, and then all of a sudden there's space sperm everywhere, and everyone's going, oh my god, and the president's like, oh my god, oh no, what are we gonna do about all of this? And then basically we go through a chase of Rick and Morty trying to hunt down and kill all of the space sperm, being unsuccessful, and then we go on to, oh, okay, well, let's use a giant egg to attract the sperm. Egg is Summer's egg, sperm is Morty's sperm. Those are brother and sister. Boom. Incest baby in space, right? Big baby, the whatever hijinks ensue. The egg is fertilized, and boom, we have giant space baby. That is the A plot of this episode, which, sure, it's a little silly, it's not the best, but is it totally laughable? In a good way, for sure, you know? It's like slightly classic Rick and Morty. It's not the most absurd episode they've had, you know? It's not the worst, it's not the craziest. I think some things that were lacking in general, a plot of this story is character development, because there was almost none of that. We're not getting really close to the characters. We're kind of watching the story unfold around them. There also weren't any, like, super crazy fight scenes in this episode either, which again, like I said, I know that's a reason that some people would really like the show. And this episode, where surely there could be a lot of big fights, there aren't really, and it's a lot of secondary characters having conversations instead of that. But other than that, there aren't a lot of differences from a mainstream Rick and Morty episode. Now, a big reason that people generally do not like this episode is because they'll say there is too damn much going on. And I have only explained so far the A plot, but let me get a little bit into all of the B plots going on in this episode. Keep in mind, we are looking at a 22-minute runtime about. So first we have Morty bonding with one of his nicer sperms because a lot of them have turned evil, who he names Sticky, and they go through kind of a character arc of becoming closer to each other and becoming friends. Then we also have the queen sperm, who is kind of a bit of a plot twist because everybody's talking about like, oh, there's no way that you think that these sperm would be ruled by a hyper intelligent woman? I don't think so. And then it is, and then she's sassy and whatever. So that's kind of another plot going on there. And then also in the background of all of this, we have the Chudlings, which you're going, Chudlings? At least those other two things kind of went along with this. The B plot of this episode, I don't know if I'd even call it a B plot. The Chudlings are kind of a secondary thing going on. It is this horse civilization that is introduced and then forgotten about after this episode that lives underground underneath the world / United States. Basically, they're like at war with the United States at this point. I find them funny. I think the Chudlings are funny. I think I appreciate having the Chudlings there, but that's an issue that people have, and they go, what's going on with these horse people? That's too much going on. We also have a little bit of an arc going on with this military character that's coming along with Rick and Morty as they are going to fight the sperm. We're introduced to him as this like meditative, like samurai ass man that's like, I'm gonna go, he's very like, I'm one with my fighting and one with my war. And then we get into him, and then it turns out that he's like, as soon as he steps up to bat, he's like a loser, and like he drops his pants, and then he's like talking about his like girlfriend who is Sports Illustrated, blah blah blah, whoever. And then obviously we're led to believe that they weren't actually dating. And then it does turn out in the end that they were together, and that is true. And then also that he like wore her underwear, and that's also kind of part of what's going on with him. And then we also have a little bit of a Beth and Summer thing going on, Beth being the mom, Summer being the daughter, where they are talking about how it's hard to be like a woman in STEM and to get your voice up and like to be a woman in a man's world. It's not that outspoken, it's more joking, but yeah, we also have that going on where they're talking to each other and being like, you're never gonna get credit for what you do, and that's just the way the world is. Summer's like, you know what, Mom, we'll be powerful women anyway. So, obviously, there are a lot of different plots going on in this episode, which is a big reason that people are not a fan of it. I do want you to keep in mind, if you've never seen the episode, a lot of what I have mentioned are very minor plot points, so they might only take up like about a minute or 2 minutes of actual screen time, but altogether, I could see why it would be a lot for a viewer to take in, a little too much going on at once. But now that you've gotten a picture of the episode and you can see, hey, there's like too much going on for there to be 22 minutes of this entire episode. That's too much to squeeze in, I get why people wouldn't like this. There's too much going on. How could you possibly intake all of this? How could they write all of this in there where it's actually funny and actually enjoyable? That's true. I'm glad that you've taken that side. I'm glad that you can think for yourself and take the information that I've given you and go, okay, I don't like the episode, okay? From what you've told me, I don't like it very much. But let me give you a little bit of my argument of why I really like the episode and think it's a pretty fun one by first talking about the behind the scenes of the writers of this episode. Okay, so if you watch Rick and Morty on HBO Max and you wait till the very end after the credits and after the after credits scene, there will always be a little talking to with the writers. The first thing that comes out of Dan Harmon's mouth, Dan Harmon is one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty, is he goes, giant sperm. So they talk about it, and it's like about how it is like a very ridiculous episode, how the initial concept of it was just like, okay, they will fight giant sperm. How do we get there? You know, it was not one of the best works, but they also talk about how it is just like a ridiculous play. You know, it is just something that they are having fun with. And this is not the first time that they've given a backstory to an episode and gone like, hey, what the fuck did we do there? I don't really know. For example, the time travel episode with snakes. If you've seen it, you know it. If you like it, you love it. And if you watch the little after credits of the writers talking about it, they go like, time traveling snakes, what is more stupid? You know, it is just, it's honestly, it's more critical of the episode than it is after this one. It's just going like, snakes, time travel, is there something more stupid? Snakes should not be evolving and they should not have this power. But back to the current episode, Rick dependent spray. They talk a lot about the contrivity of the episode and how we have a complicated dynamic of the audience knows something that Rick doesn't know, but Morty knows it, but he won't tell. And that's how this episode starts, is it starts on this very complicated dynamic between the characters that like was confusing to unfold. They say that it was like an episode that was sitting out on the table for a while. And you might be thinking again, like, okay, well, the creators didn't like the episode. Why should I, you know? Clearly they were confused about the way they wrote it and were just messing around and barely cared. But again, this is something that the creators talk about for a lot of their episodes as they go, man, was that just ridiculous? Did we just go crazy with that and have fun? Again, with the snake episode, and then another with Never Ricking Morty, which is an episode where they like ride around on a train and everybody tells little vignettes about, you know, their stories of Rick and whatever, but it's fake. All the characters are fake, and it's like a very convoluted story where it's like the whole thing is meta, and it's like the show talking about the show and talking about the setups of the show, and they get to the end of it and go like, man, was that stupid? Was that just like a dumbass thing that we made? We don't know. So I think that a lot of Rick and Morty and what makes it so fun and makes it such a great show is that the creators have the ability to just be like, we play. We just went out there and had fun with this episode, which is what they had also done with Rick Dependent Spray. They went out there, they had fun with the episode. They played with it. They did silly ideas, you know what I mean? They were just creative and created something absurdist, but also like really enjoyable for the viewer. Okay, I know that ended kind of abruptly, but thank you so much for watching. I hope that you kind of got at least like a little bit of information, something from that, a little bit of a conclusion, a little bit of, oh, and then I know a little bit more about Rick and Morty now. Wow, I'm so educated. Wow, I'm so glad that I watched this digest because I'm so smart now and I know so much about that episode about space sperm. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Bye.